All right, I wanted to talk about my new brakes that I have on my G87 here, so let's get to it. This is AP Racing. I got this from Essex. Great guys to work with, answered my questions and did a really good job. This is the AP 9668 caliper, which accepts 25 millimeter thick pads. I want to talk about some of the things I really like about this caliper and some of my initial reviews after having it on 2 different track days. First of all, it's really well designed. I mean, the way that this caliper is so sleek, and it's got plenty of passages for air to move through to help keep it cool. I think I probably like the most about it is you can take pads in and out through this back side. There's some bolts that go through here, which I have removed at the moment. Or you can have a spring clip for a quick disconnect. And then so once you bolt it to the brackets here, that's a one-time deal. You don't have to take that off unless you're taking the rotor off. That's a lot better than the stock calipers, which every time you change the pads, you have to undo a bolt here and a bolt at the bottom, which uses single-use nuts, and pull the caliper off of some studs. Sometimes you have to kind of rock it off and it binds, and take a little rubber mallet and help persuade it to get off. So that was always a real big pain, made changing pads difficult. And I've changed a lot of pads in the 1.5 years that I've owned this car. A lot more than you might expect. So that's really cool. It's very light caliper, a couple pounds lighter. Don't remember how much exactly, but it's listed on their website. You can look it up because you know how to Google. But it's got some pretty cool features as far as the cooling capacity of it. Just being able to cool the whole system. The rotors use this little scallop cut here, which helps cooling. Lots of veins up in here, plenty more than stock, and they're directional, so there's a right rotor and a left rotor just to aid in the cooling of the rotor. So it does a really good job at keeping the whole system nice and cool. One of the other cool things about it, I got this pad removed here so you can kind of see it if I get there. Well, I can't get much closer than that without getting the camera all wonky. But so there's the pistons, 3 pistons in each side. The bottom piston is actually smaller diameter than the middle one, which is smaller than the top one here. And the reason for that is because as the rotor is turning this direction here, and you're going to have a bigger bite at the bottom, but with a smaller piston, you'll have less force there. So you'll ultimately have a pretty close to even pressure distribution across the whole pad, so that way you'll have less chance of tapering the pad. That's pretty cool because with my stock ones, I did taper, I think, 2 sets of different pads, where it's made the useful life of the pad quite a bit shorter because you get down close to the metal on one end and you still have 3/8 of an inch of pad on the other end. Other thing that's cool about this is no rubber, no seals on here to burn up or blow out. The pistons here have a little notches cut in the face of them. That again helps with cooling. As air goes by, air is allowed to go inside of the piston because the piston's shaped like a cup. A little bit different from the Lightning McQueen's piston cup, but it sits a little cup inside there so the air can flow through those little holes, little cutouts, cool down the piston. And removing heat is the name of the game here, and that's an assist on that. For reference, here is a stock caliper. Let me see if I can hold it up. You can kind of see the size difference here. I'm struggling a little bit because this thing's a little hard to hold outstretched with one arm. But quite a bit bigger in size, more mass there. You can see the bolts, the holes here that the studs would go through that I have to remove it off every time I change the pads. And you look inside of there, all those dust caps, which are fairly useless, all burnt up and toast. So this thing's seen better days, but man, I got this sucker hot on more than one occasion, and it shows. So they did a good job stopping, but this is an upgrade. So I'm really pleased with it. They're quite spendy, but the rotors are fantastic, and the caliper is nice and light, and it provides some good cooling. Okay, now let's talk about some of my concerns with it. So what my concern basically is that this braking surface here has less area than the stock rotor. The outside diameter is the same, but the inside diameter is larger on the AP9668 caliper setup than what the stock one is. So with a larger inside diameter, you have less area right here. As a comparison, here is a stock size rotor. Now this is actually a gyro disc rotor, but it's the same size as the stock one. And you know, it's this inside diameter here is smaller, so you have a larger area right here for braking force to be applied. As an example, here are the pads. This is a stock size pad. If I remember correctly, this one's a Carbotech XP20. This is the pads I bought with the 9668 caliper from AP Racing in Essex. This is a Ferodo 3.12, I believe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Ferodo correctly, but I'm going with it. And you can tell there's quite a bit of a difference in the size of those pads. So is this a big deal? Well, yes and no. And I know that's incredibly conclusive, but hear me out here. So the difference in the diameters is on the inside diameter, which means that the inner portion of the braking surface is where we're missing surface area. Okay, but on the outer portion of the braking surface, that's where the angular velocity is greater. And then so we're doing more work to stop the force being applied by the brake pads are more effective on the outside than as you get closer to the inside. So the area we're missing on these rotors compared to stock is of less importance than if the rotor itself was smaller altogether. Now the total difference between these two rotors is about 21 square inches, and that's on the whole circumference of the inside diameter. Not just the braking area. You can tell that there is a bit of area difference here between the two pads. I'm not too sure how much, but with that said, I took this on 2 track days so far, 5 sessions at Motorsports Ranch in Crescent on the 1.7 mile track, and 5 sessions at Circuit of the Americas where I pushed this sucker hard and I braked hard. Back on the back stretch, I came from 171 miles an hour, down to, I don't know, maybe around 40 miles an hour. Pushing on the brakes stomping on the brakes right around the 150 mark. So I'm hitting the brakes really, really hard, generating lots of heat. These did a really good job. I actually felt more confident in this than I did on the stock setup, despite the pads being smaller and the braking surface being smaller. Now, the trade-off so far, as it seems in the 2 track days I took this on, is one that I really wasn't anticipating. One of the things I was really excited about this setup was I can use 25 millimeter pads on here. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, let me show you this real quick. This is a part of my collection of brake pads in the year and a half that I've owned this car. I'm not too sure how many I've gone through, but most of these pads start out at about 18, 19 millimeters thick, including the backing plate, which gives you probably about 12 millimeters or so of useful braking material. And, I would get them down pretty darn close before I would change them out. Here's one that's tapered. You can see that here. This one's tapered quite a bit, back to where it was too risky to use it. I'm not going to get a full track day out of that. So I was getting about 2 to 3 track days out of a set of pads. And what I was really hoping for with this 25 millimeter pads that come off the AP Racing is I was hoping to get, 5 or 6 track days out of it. Well, with the goal of getting 5 or 6 track days out of 25 millimeter pads, that's one of the things that really was helping me make this decision to pull the trigger on getting these this brakes. But the trade-off with having a smaller braking surface is, quite frankly, I think I'm going through pads just as fast as before, relatively speaking. So this pad being smaller, this is 2 track days, 5 sessions at Motorsports Ranch in Crescent and 5 sessions at Coda. And this started out as 25 millimeters. Now this is 15.5. So I've used 9.5 millimeters of pad life on this so far, and there's 9.5 millimeters left. So I'll definitely be able to get 1 more track day out of this, which will be a total of 3, but I'm not going to get 4. So I'm still stuck with 3 track days per pad, sets of pads. So I didn't get the improvement there that I was hoping for initially. Now I've tried on my stock pads, I have used EBC blue stuff, which I'm not a fan of at all. I've used Pagid RS29, which I'm also not a fan of for some different reasons. Several G-Locks and Carbotex and Cobalt, and another one that's slipping my mind at the moment. So far, all I've had on this one is just the Ferodo 3.12, which I tell you felt really good. I had really smooth modulation on it, very, very predictable. I never overheated anything. And the initial bite was pretty, I'm going to say medium to aggressive, but not nearly as aggressive as like a G-Lock 16 or Carbotech XP20. But the modulation was really good, and the lift off the brake pedal was nice and clean with no dragging. So it was a really good performing pad from that standpoint. But I'm not going to get 4 track days out of this like I was hoping to be able to get 4+, I guess is what I was hoping to get using a thicker pad. So that's kind of the trade-off, right? We've got a smaller braking surface here, which is going to then use up more of the pad as you're trying to slow down the car. But putting that aside, it's still a fantastic upgrade. I'm still getting about the same track life as I did, or pad life, excuse me, as I did with the stock setup. But I've got great pedal feel, better heat withdrawal out of the whole system. The vanes work great. The caliper stays nice and cool. I never overheated anything. The gyro discs, which I had for I think 1, maybe 2 track days, were fantastic. Don't get me wrong; these are great. I was switched to the AP Racing because I just wanted to. I had some wanted to try the best of the best, and this is what I went for. I would say that if this is a 10, then the gyro discs are probably an 8, and the stock setup is probably a 4 or a 5. So these are significant improvement over stock. But with AP Racing, you've got improved rotor and improved caliper. Now, on pads. Doing lots of research because I'm not super pleased with this pad that I have from Ferodo as far as the life goes. Like I said, the pedal feel feels great. But what I'm looking at now is I did some research and found that EBC on the SR21 makes a pad that is the same shape. And so I'm going to do one more track day on this Ferodos to get some more analysis out of them, but then I'm going to switch over to these EBCs. So it's the same size. It's got the 25 millimeter thick, so it's a nice big ice cream sandwich here. The cool thing that's got me excited about this is sintered metal. Now, I'm very familiar with sintering. I actually have a sintering process on my work, and I'm embarrassed to say that I thought all brake pads were sintered, but they're not. They are mostly, bits of copper and metal and ceramics that are all bonded together with a binder, which is why you have to bed these to get that binder material kind of heat up and kind of seal everything. Sintering is a different process, and sintering you're putting metal granules together inside of a mold, applying heat and pressure, infusing the metal together. Much like if you look at a styrofoam cup, all the polystyrene bubbles are fused together. That's a very similar analogy to how sintered works. So I'm excited for this because from what I've read so far, these last a long time and are friendly on the rotors and have very minimal dust. So it's a win-win-win, and the stopping power is supposedly fantastic. It's a very flat curve. It's about, I think, a 0.65 mu on the coefficient of friction, and it's fairly flat across all the temperature ranges. So although these are not recommended for being used on the road, you're not going to die having these on your car when you drive to the track and you have to stop at a red light before you get to the track. So I'm really excited about that. Whenever I ran some Carbotex or Pagid or what else, Cobalt, I'd always have to kind of push on the brakes a couple times hard coming out of my neighborhood to get them warm, so that way when I get to that first stoplight, I know I could be able to stop safely. My car is not a daily driver, it's track only, but it is drive to the track. So anyway, so this is going to be next. I will be sure to report back on what I think of these after I run them for a few days. but I'm going to do one more day on the Ferodos here, and then I'm going to switch over to the EBC SR21 pad. Have some high hopes for that, and hopefully it's going to work out great. Anyway, any questions or comments, feel free to drop a comment in the video, and thanks for listening to me talk about my AP Racing 9668 calipers.